Hello, everyone. Welcome to Between the Lines. I'm Sarah M. Eden here with Esther Hatch, Tracy Hunter Abramson, and Sean Ann Bessie. And today we are joined by a very special guest who we're so excited to have with us in the studio, Nancy Peterson. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I am particularly excited to have Nancy here because I've been telling the other ladies for, no kidding, probably 2 years now, I need to see if Nancy will come be a guest on a podcast episode because I love Nancy. Nancy is an audiobook narrator, and she is fabulous. I really got to know Nancy because she is the narrator for my Hope Springs series of books. I produce those, I should say produce. I have them produced and made myself. They don't go through a publisher. That's what I'm attempting to say. So I got to put the project up for audition way back in the day when I was getting ready to have Love Remains done, and received probably almost 200 auditions for this book, and was going through them, and there were some good ones and some that were really interesting. And then I got to one that literally just stopped me in my tracks. And I listened to it on repeat multiple times and I knew I'd found a gem, and it was Nancy. I mean, just blew me out of the water. This book and this whole series has very specific British accents, a 19th century Baltimore accent, an American West accent, and a Georgia accent, and variations on the Irish accent. It's one of the most ridiculously complicated books you could hand to a narrator. And she just nailed it every single time. Blown away. So that's how I got to know Nancy. She's remarkable. So everyone, Nancy Peterson.
I didn't know that just thank you. I hadn't heard that whole story. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. It's good to meet you all.
Well, let's hear your side of it, Nancy. How did you get into audiobook narrating?
Okay, I have a short version and a long version. So to keep things concise, I'll do the short version. I've been in performance most of my life since I was a child. And my father went through a period when he was blind and would get these funny little black floppy records in the mail. And so I would go very carefully in the room because he had just had eye surgery, and I would sit and listen with him. And so there was something about that I really enjoyed. I grew up listening. I grew up loving audio versions, the cassette tapes and the records from Disney. I probably have all of those memorized and could still sing you all the songs and tell you the story of the three pigs and all the voices. And so it's something, honestly, I have loved and has meant much to me. And there's something about storytelling, I think, it's my own thought, but it's kind of, there's something very primal about the storytelling process, that the oral storytelling process that can really impact us. So that's how I became a listener. And then when I was in 6th grade, I stole my dad's tape recorder and started narrating the great, Encyclopedia Brown into the tape recorder. And I erased some really important business things he had on his tape recorder, not knowing, but I was not supposed to touch it. But oh well, I never, I never got in trouble, thankfully. But it wasn't until 2013 when I was very serious and I thought, I really want to do this, and started looking into it. And that's where I found ACX, and you and I connected on there, Sarah. It's basically a platform where independent authors and narrators, and all of us are independent contractors, you can go audition. And that was wonderful because I didn't live in an area where, there was a publisher. Michigan had Brilliance. So people in Michigan, especially theater actors, had access to be able to be hired by Brilliance, or on the coast, like Penguin Random House or Simon & Schuster, Chicago, New York, California. And so this to me was how I got started. And I owe a lot to that little platform, ACX, which, is it, it's we complain about it sometimes, but it really, I have to say it was a great way for me to get started in audiobooks. So I love it.
Fabulous.
That's so awesome.
fun.
So, okay, audiobooks so much more popular in recent years. Why do you think that is?
I thought about this because it has double-digit growth every year since I've been involved in 2013. And I think there's a couple of reasons. Writing a book has become more accessible for people. And I feel that, we're seeing a lot more independent authors out there. And along with that, there's also been a push for accessibility. And a lot of people want them, not just for, I love to listen when I'm doing dishes or when I'm driving. It keeps me awake. And so it's really great to have an audiobook playing in my car. But for some people, there is an accessibility issue. And some of that we're still actually navigating, because it can be very difficult for someone who, has vision problems to have access to some of the same things. And I think as the light's being shined on accessibility more, that they are becoming more popular. And I also think, I don't know, maybe it's kind of addictive because if you start listening, for me, I have some series that I will listen to and I'm like, I got to get the next one, so it becomes this situation where you just can't wait to listen to the next one. And then you tell your friends, and it's like books. I think people just enjoy it so much. And then they have a favorite narrator or a favorite author, and it's like having a friend, and who doesn't want that connection? And I think maybe even through the COVID pandemic, we really wanted connection. And I think that is part of it, because if you think about how a book is produced, it's from your heart. I know that it's your baby. And in that situation, we as narrators, we love those babies too, right? And there is something very personal about someone telling you a story in that way that I think people crave almost, So especially when we've had issues with having, in the past few years, having to worry about, quarantining and things like that. So anyway.
It's awesome.
Well, I've definitely, my listening to audiobooks has surged in the last couple of years. I went through like a little bit of a time where I was struggling to read books, which was not normal for me at all. I have loved books my whole life. And I totally give credit to audiobooks for kind of bringing me back into the world of reading. I was kind of in a slump for like a long time. And there's a few reasons. Like you said, you can do it while you're doing other things on long drives. For me, also, I listen while I fall asleep. And I love that there's like a timer setting on my phone, so I can just like listen to 30 minutes. Because when I was reading, and this is one of the reasons I stopped reading, is I would read till 4 a.m. or something, because like I couldn't stop. So like having like a timer is actually helpful, so I can be like, okay, I'm gonna get enough sleep and I can continue tomorrow. So yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of things I just really, really love about audiobooks. So I have a question for you. Talked about ACX and how you got started into it. For indie authors that might be listening today, I think finding a narrator and putting out an audiobook is very daunting. It was for me, definitely, the first time I did it. So for those authors that are interested in having audiobook versions made of their books, what advice do you have to like how to like break into that?
It's changed a little bit. ACX is still a really great place to put your book up for auditions. That's where, you can literally put it in there and have the narrators read your actual work so you can get a feel, just like Sarah did. There have been some changes in that. I think asking colleagues is always helpful, and in finding that narrator, because there's been a push, and I don't know if it's what you would call like the gig economy, where people say, if you have a phone and you know how to read, you can make $1,000 an hour being an audiobook narrator. You've probably seen some of those or had something similar. So there has been a deluge of interest in narration, and it's not all being beneficial to the industry. So you might get a lot of people on their iPhone in their bathroom, doing an audition. So there's that. So I think, having a network of friends who have used people, like here we have a narrator group. I would say I know most like full-time career narrators. in this industry. It's a small industry. It's fabulous industry. In where I live in my state, we have an actual narrator group where we are able to reach out to one another. Like I had a project come my way and I wasn't quite right for it. So I said, but I have these friends and I'd love to send you to them and you can reach out and see if they're a good fit for the project. I think anything like that, if, being involved with other authors who've had in a similar genre, or there's a variety of ways of doing it, but is okay. No, I kind of forgot your question. Are we talking just about creator, or are we talking about creating the audiobook in general? Sorry.
I think both a little bit. Like, I just think back to when I was doing it. I think the biggest concern was picking the narrator because they are your voice for your characters and your book, and it can make or break an audiobook, obviously. so that was my biggest challenge, I think. But I think also just how do you do it then? What are the processes?
Okay, and yes, so that's a big piece of it, because your narrator, if you're going independent, is also your producer, and so you want to make sure you are hiring someone that has a pretty good body of work under them. They don't have to have 100 or more, but something that proves that they're up to the task, because there are certain specs that they need to be able to hit, and deadlines are important, and understanding this is a business and all those things that go into it. Because I have been in situations where someone has said, well, my narrator kind of decided they didn't want to do it anymore, and they'll reach out to me, and that's frustrating for an author when especially if they have things in place where I have a pre-order and then I want the book done here. So looking at that, the other part is there is a financial part. It can be expensive. So one thing that I'm doing more of, and a lot of my colleagues are doing more, is looking into creative ways to help our authors to create a book. And one of those ways is, for example, Kickstarter. We're as a group, we're looking at how do we assist an author with a Kickstarter project? How do we use our social presence, on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, to help boost that? And we're learning some things about this. This is sort of the new frontier. And along with that, also exploring things like royalty share, which is sometimes a great option. And I think there are some misconceptions about royalty share, because royalty share, you typically don't pay anything up front, with exception maybe partially some of the post-production costs, like for an editor, post-production team, proofer, mastering, getting it mastered and ready for retail. However, those contracts, we as narrators, we don't own the copyright to the book. And I want to make that very clear, because some people were like, well, I don't want to give up my copyright, which is, I can understand that concern. So we only own part of the copyright. Actually, we don't own the copyright. The copyright stays with the rights holder, who is the author. And you'll hear that in any of the Audible books. They will say copyright and, Sarah M. Eden, or, whoever. If you have a company, it's usually the company. And so they stay there. But it's a great option if you don't have a budget to go towards your audiobook. The other option is to save for it, because it can be a situation where, like we talked about earlier, there is double-digit growth in audiobooks every year for the past 10 years. And that's according to Publishers Weekly, and I think they're a pretty good resource. Anyway, I feel like, leaving it off the table is becoming less and less of an option. I think you want to look at it. And I think most narrators now are really looking at ways to be of assistance in that process, whether it's going a royalty share, whether it's helping with a Kickstarter, or whether it's even just figuring out a budget so you know even where to go. So anyway, I think there are many, many possible options for new authors. And if you are working with someone who, again, has a body of work, again, doesn't have to be 1 million books or whatever,
Right.
just has some experience and understands the process, I think they can give you their version of how that can work for them.
I love
awesome.
that. I hadn't really thought of it, but it makes sense. You're in essence creating a team, between reaching out to other authors who've done audiobooks and saying, who have you worked with? Or reaching out to a narrator you've worked with in the past and said, can you recommend someone? And I think there's comfort in knowing that even though it can be overwhelming, the idea of producing an audiobook of one of your books, you don't have to be doing it alone. And that alone, I think, makes it less daunting.
Yes. And this is one thing that as narrators/producers, we understand is that honestly, the buck stops here. I want you to be happy with what you receive. And so, we work through that process together. There have been situations that have not gone as planned. And as I've redone an entire audiobook for when there was a technical issue that was not caught. And so, it worked out, it was fine, but it was one of those things. It's like sometimes when you're wearing the producer hat, that's your job. And so, yes, we are a team. We want to be part of that team and work as a team and be helpful, in any way we can. So
I love that.
Oh, it's so fascinating to hear the behind the scenes, because for most of us, you just listen to the story, like you were saying before, it's just entertainment. And when you were talking before about your memories, Nancy, it brought to mind a memory for me. When I was young, I remember every night my father would do the dinner dishes, while listening to a series on the radio. It was a dramatized series, and this was in Britain. So anybody who was in Britain that long ago, it was called The Archers. I can still remember the signature tune because it would play and then he'd start doing the dishes and he'd listen. And I feel like audiobooks have become our old radio series, that it's the same type of magic where you're imagining it as you listen. And I do have those kind of warm, fuzzy feelings as I think about that. And so I totally relate with the feelings that you had listening with your father too. So anyway, I felt a big bond over that.
it's a way to connect. I think
It is.
It also is a wonderful thing about being a human, just this power of connection, and not only connection, but learning something or learning or living in someone else's shoes for a little while.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So fun. Well, if there was one book or a type of book that would be a dream come true for you to narrate, what would it be?
That is a really hard question. Yeah.
It's okay if you say a Sarah M. Eden book or an Esther Hatch book.
I have to say, I don't have one.
Mhm.
I have like milestone, like all of us have. I remember the first book I read that was so important to me, that made me understand why my friends thought reading was so cool. I did not read well till probably 6th grade. And in 6th grade, I understood it when I read The Black Stallion by Walter Farley. I went,
Mhm.
I get it now. I understand why my friends think this is the most amazing thing. I just couldn't, it couldn't grab me. So there are moments like that. And I've worked for the major publishers. I've worked with authors, some of them that really their only purpose was to do one book. It was just to tell us one story that they needed to tell. And I'll tell you, I have had some really wonderful, meaningful experiences in all of those. So I don't know that I have one dream book that I would love to narrate. I actually just love reading them all.
I think that's wonderful, because if you were to flip the table and ask us that, we probably would give the exact same response as
answer.
far as writing a
Uh-huh.
book. Yeah.
Right. For
Yeah.
sure. Okay, so here's another question to put you a little on the spot.
Okay.
One of the things that grabbed my attention when you first auditioned for that Hope Springs book long, long ago was how fantastic you were at doing so many different accents and dialects. So can we put you on the spot and ask you to just pick one and share it with us?
Well, and I will say that I love the British Bake Off. I love the Bake Off. so I can sit and listen to that all day.
When you started with, I must say, I thought, I know what this is.
Yeah. Love Bake Off. Another thing that goes along with that is I've done a lot of German. I've had to learn that, though. It didn't come as naturally to me. So I've had to figure out where the placement of the consonants, vowels, where it sits in your mouth. And I love to do little kids too. And old ladies, I like to do old ladies. One of my favorites is Hattie. Hattie from, I can't even remember the series actually, but I love her voice. She's 102. She was based on a real person.
Oh my word. I just want to go listen to you all day long.
Oh my gosh.
That it shows how much the voice, like how having the right person can bring something to life. Like it is reading the pages is a one experience, but listening to it is a completely different entertainment experience.
Right. Yeah.
It is. And it varies from book to book. It's for some books, it's appropriate to go all out into all the accents and all the voices. And for some, it's not. It depends on the genre. It depends on really the perspective of the book, POV. And so that's where kind of this team comes together where you go, okay, what do you envision here? And it, again, genre really matters. Some of the funnest things I get to do, there's our fantasy, because you can just go kind of crazy with fantasy with voices. And that's when we really, as far as like an acting job, it becomes an acting job, a real performance, which I absolutely love. But then there are some, I had an author recently, just came out this week. She said, I want you to pull back on everything. I want it very quiet, very still. And it works for her book. It's a nonfiction, and it's based on art. I mean, it's fabulous. So it just really depends. And that to me is one of the most fun things and creative parts of my job is kind of navigating what is going to work for this particular book and this author. So it's fun. I enjoy it.
That's awesome.
You guys can see why. Like I fell in love with Nancy
Yeah.
to the point that when I'm getting ready to write another one in this series, before I even start writing it, I reach out to her and say, what does your schedule look like about a year from now? Because there's no way I'm going to write one of these books and not have her be the narrator for it.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Okay. So I'm going to toss out a question to everyone here. We'll start with Nancy. What is a favorite audiobook of yours that you enjoy listening to? One that you could recommend to our listeners here on the podcast.
Okay, I love, one of my favorite genres is mystery thriller. And the Flavia DeLuce series by Alan Bradley is one that has stuck with me for years, and I will re-listen to it, and it's because of the narrator. Jane Entwistle is someone who she didn't know this, but impacted my desire to become a narrator after I listened to that. And I was so into it, and I love this series so much. So I think the audiobook of the Flavia DeLuce by Alan Bradley was a big one for me.
Fabulous.
So for me, I feel like I notice, so I've had a few books that I've listened to that I'm like, ooh, this is even better than reading. But I could not remember what they were. And like I have a book club that I totally love. And every once in a while we'll have a book where people say, if you can, get the audiobook, because it's even better than reading it. So I wish I had an example like that, but instead, because I can't remember them, I'm just going to say like my most recent is North and South, which is my favorite book anyway. And so like just listening to it was so fun. I think sometimes, sadly, what I notice more than like the amazing audiobook narrators, or sometimes there's the ones that you're like, I might have liked this book better had someone else narrated it. So when you find those great narrators, or even just narrators that can like do your book justice, I think it's so important. Yeah.
Do you remember who the narrator was of the version you listened to?
I don't even remember. I feel bad. It's not, I know that the actor who plays John Thornton, I think narrates it, and like my dream is to listen to that version, but I haven't yet.
Richard Armitage?
Yes, thank you. Richard Armitage.
Awesome.
I
I haven't
think,
listened to that one.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think he might have a version of it, and I need to look it up and see. It was the one that was on Libby, though, so
He has
I'm not sure.
The version of North and South done by Juliet Stevenson, I think is her name, is incredible.
That might be the one. That might be what I listened to. It was great.
I want to put your mind at ease, though, Esther, because one of the greatest compliments you can give us is you forgot who was telling the story. Because when it comes right down to it, it's really about the story itself and the writing more than it is about the narrator. So it's okay. I am just honored when someone says, I absolutely loved this. That's all I need to hear. You know, you don't need to even mention me. So you're okay. I'm okay with that.
Having listened to a lot now, that is the most important thing to me, is for me to not even notice the narrator that much, you know.
You're lost in the story performance.
Unless I'm noticing them because they're amazing. I think that's so fun when that happens. But I think more important is just to be like, totally immersed in the book, which most narrators do amazing jobs at, like, honestly.
So that's a compliment. It's okay if you don't know our name.
I actually haven't listened to a lot of audiobooks, but the Harry Potter one, I think, will always be one of the top ones for me. And I think it's for multiple reasons. One is that the actors are just so phenomenal and just throw themselves into those characters. The other thing that I love, and maybe it's because I'm from Britain and I'm so aware of this, I love the fact that there is such a range of British accents that are represented, because so many people who are not from the country think that there's just one accent, you know, the BBC accent or maybe the Cockney accent, but there's so many, and I love how well they're done. And then the third reason is, again, it's a memory. My son was a huge Harry Potter fan. Harry Potter was what got this particular son reading and loving reading. And he had a paper route. And so he would listen to Harry Potter as he did his paper route on his scooter. He was on a scooter with a little headset on, listening to Harry Potter. And he listened to those so many times that to this day, we have a family game that we play with him where someone can open any Harry Potter book and read a line, and he will tell you which book it's from and who's speaking.
I love that.
Because he basically memorized all 7 books in audio form. And so anyway, I have warm feelings for that narration because of what it opened up for him.
And funny, I think my favorite is for this similar reason. A couple of my kids are dyslexic. And so for them, as they were learning to read, there were times where it was like just such a relief to let them dive into a story and not worry about having to translate the words off the page. But one of my favorites is the series by Ranger's Apprentice series by John Flanagan. Those were extremely well done. And so every time we were on a road trip, it's like, oh, we get to listen to another one. And it's the thing I love is that when you get into a really great audiobook, you get to where you don't want to stop. It's like, okay, how can we make it to the next gas station? Because I don't really want to turn off the car, you know, but it was like, okay, maybe in Western Pennsylvania, that's not a good plan. We'll stop. But yeah, but it was just, I think it was John Keating, I think was the narrator on that one. But anyway, but those remain among my favorites. So it's so fun.
I think one of my favorites, and I recommend it all the time, is the book As You Wish, which is a book about the making of the movie The Princess Bride. And it was written by Cary Elwes, who played Wesley, and he does the narrating as well. He reads the book. And because he's an actor, I mean, he performs it. It's incredible, but fun stories. It's wonderfully performed. I listened to it in the car with my kids back when they were younger, and I was driving them to and from rehearsals and practices and appointments. And we listened to it together. And while it is on its own an incredible book, and I've listened to it again since then, it also was kind of like these ladies were saying, a moment of bonding between us where we shared an experience listening to stories. And I think there's so much power in that. It's one of the things I think makes audiobooks an incredible thing. They're entertaining, they bring stories to us, but they also bond us together. And anytime something can do that, I think that's pretty powerful. So that's one of my favorites. I'm going to toss that same question out to our listeners. Leave us a comment on this video on our YouTube channel or over on this post on our social media. Let us know a favorite audiobook of yours, one that you would recommend, one that has brought you enjoyment. We love getting recommendations. We want to give a special, huge thank you to Nancy for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So great to have you. We have to have you come back again and just do voices for us.
I would love
Yes.
That would be so much fun.
We'll have readers call in and be like, do this.
Yes.
Really put her on the spot.
That actually would be like the best episode ever. Let's pencil that in, ladies. That'd be amazing.
That would be
All right.
awesome.
Fabulous. Well,
be
thank you
great.
to everyone who has joined us here today for this fantastic episode. And we will see you next time on Between the Lines.